I came to music through my family. My mother was an opera singer, so we had a piano in the house all the time. And my dad was not a musician, but he loved music, and he had a lot of recordings from jazz at the Philharmonic and singers like Nat Cole and Ella Fitzgerald and stuff. So I heard all these tunes when I was really young, and it's got the jazz bug, I guess, and started picking out tunes by ear and sort of dropped classical piano early on, and I started playing by ear and stuff, and never really thought about being a musician. You know, I did a few tunes for this senior show in high school. But when I went away to college to become a doctor, I thought I started playing piano in the lounge, you know, in the student lounge of my dining commons, and thought, oh my God, you know, this is fun. You know, people would gather around and sing and dance and have a good time. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I heard this late night working in a gas station once, Miles Davis, kind of one of his more modern compositions, and with electric sound, and I thought, you know, this is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. This is what I want to do. So I dropped it all. I went to music school for a couple of years and got into music. So I got into it because I just love the social feeling of it, you know, being a part of something that was exciting like that, and that I could actually make that music and communicate through that music. Just seemed like the greatest thing in the world to be able to do. So from then it was going through the hard work of, you know, studying and going to jam sessions. I moved to San Francisco in 1970, I think it was, and immediately got asked, because I was just around and I could play a little piano, to do some jam sessions, you know, with Russ Sonro and Kirk, the saxophone player, and Tom Harrell, a great trumpet player, and there's just a lot of great people around that wanted to play and needed to play all the time. And so I happened to be lucky enough to be available, and I got a chance to play with a lot of great people, but also just to experience that community of musicians working on their craft. And so that's where I really started to learn the music. I had a decent foundation from Berkeley and Boston of, you know, chord changes and theory and stuff like that. Now I was starting to apply it, and so that was the beginning. And then I started working in clubs in San Francisco and working at all-night jam sessions with various people. Got to play with, you know, Pharoah Sanders and Freddie Hubbard, and, you know, just all kinds of great players, and just the community of musicians that were around there too. And you learn something from every single person you play with, you know. And that's kind of one thing I try to teach students, although I don't teach that much music anymore. Excuse me. But I try to teach them that, you know, whenever you play with someone, you know, keep your ears open, keep your heart open. You're going to learn something, you know. Not only do they have great stories to tell, some of the older cats, but they have all the musical wisdom and history and culture that came before them embedded in their playing and in their souls, you know. So hang out, listen, learn, and try to emulate some of that stuff every so often, you know? And it'll become part of your playing. And all of a sudden you become part of the greater world of jazz, you know? So when I moved to the Valley, from San Francisco, in Oakland actually is where I live. When I moved to the Valley, I do like any other musician would do. I look around for players and stuff, and you know, it was kind of hard. The level, there was a little bit of scene. Archie Shepp was here then, and Marion Brown, nice alto saxophone player, and Charles Majid Greenlee. So there was a scene here of very good, internationally known players who have settled in the Valley here. It had, you know, it's a reputation of being a nice place to live. It's got the 5 colleges, so they can bring in, you know, interesting people touring and lecturing and stuff like that. So I guess that's one of the reasons why there was a little bit of a scene here. So is that background enough of, so far? I forgot the second part of your question. Yes. How did it influence me?
Yeah, no, well, how does the Pioneer Valley like influence jazz? How does it shape jazz in this area?
You know, jazz is a music like a lot of evolving music forms and improvisational forms. Is it takes on the character and flavor of wherever it is, and it incorporates it as part of that. So if anything, the Valley influences it just by people working with and seeing all the people that come through the town, and they get influenced by it, and they share their ideas, musicians do. Just as the way the greater world of music, jazz music does, is that it gets influenced by what's around it and incorporates it, sucks it up, and spits it out in a different way, you know. And usually that different way comes from individual musicians and their own takes on it. And that's what nice thing about so-called jazz. There's a fight among jazz players, but what is jazz? You know, is it just classical American music? Is it African American music? Is it improvisational music? Is it, you know, there's lots of different names for it. Some people don't like the word jazz, but to me, it's always meant this improvisational, social, historic, and forward-reaching at the same time music that can encompass everything around it, from classical to Latin to funk. You know, all kinds of music can be a part of jazz and go through a person, and then when they bring it back out, it has another take, a little slightly different take. So, I mean, that's the influence there. It's not, you know, a huge fertile ground here, but one thing, the need that myself and some other musicians found was that there was no place where all the musicians could get together on a regular basis and exchange ideas and meet each other and, you know, do that. So that's why we started this jam session thing.
So when you just started to actually go in the direction that was next on, could you tell us a little bit about the history of the trio? How did you guys come together? How did they start out?
Well, we had all worked together a little bit here and there. The bass player and I especially had worked together a lot. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going back. There were several bass players that I worked together a lot. But the one that I started with, who passed on a year ago now, Dave Shapiro, you know, he used to play with a lot of groups. He was from Brooklyn. He used to play with Woody Herman and a lot of different bands, toured and worked in New York a lot. But he and I have been playing together for maybe 15 years or so with various ensembles. And we both found a need to have a regular gig and pass on kind of what we know, you know, because we were both getting up there in age and feeling like, you know, we need to get the younger people to feel what we feel about the music, you know, and experience kind of what we experienced when we were growing up. So Dave and I started. Dave really liked John Fisher, whom I'd worked with a little bit, but John had gone on cruise ships and kind of dropped out of music for a little while and then came back to the scene. And he was really starting to swing hard, and Dave said, let's get him in and as our drummer, you know. So I said, you know, sure. The bass player has to, you know, like the drummer. So, and John, you know, he lived up in Greenfield at the time, and Dave used to live way up in Townsend, Vermont, which is 20 minutes past Brattleboro. But they would come every Tuesday night, you know, to play for peanuts, to do this thing. And right from, you know, the third or fourth week, people started showing up, and it was great. So we've been, Dave only lasted maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and his health deteriorated pretty quickly. And George and I had worked together quite a bit too. You know, between George and Dave is bass player heaven around here. We're pretty lucky to have two really good bass players settling in this area, because, you know, there's not that much work here. So it was really nice that they were here. They're both from New York. And George has a lot of experience touring, great jazz players, and knows all the history, knows all the music. So we got him in. He was the first call after Dave went.
So, I mean, basically, you started talking about how the Tuesday nights grow for you guys coming together. What could you describe what average Tuesday night is? What's like the behavior for some of the routines that develop in the community? So, people come together, they come for a concert, it's a jam session. Could you just talk about the atmosphere?
Well, what happens is we usually show up, an hour or so before the gig, and we start setting up, and we tell our lame jokes and stuff like that. And then as we getting the sound set up, some of the regulars start feeding in early, and then our guest artists, there's a different guest artist every week, oftentimes from out of town, will show up, and we'll start talking about tunes and play a few notes to make sure everything's working, and get a set list together, and order some food, and then along about 7:30, there's a crowd develops, and then we hit for an hour, featuring the guest artists. So it's their band, whether it's a vocalist or a horn player or guitar or whatever it is. We're their band for the hour. It's a democratic thing, so if we don't want to play a tune or something like that, we can say it, but I ask them to play what they really want to do, as long as it doesn't involve too much complicated reading or something like that, so that everyone gets an idea of what that artist is about, what they're into, because that's part of it. We bring something different every week, so if you're a regular listener, you get something, interesting and different every week, and it kind of builds up everybody's repertoire, especially mine. I learn new tunes, new chord changes, and new takes on the music. So we go through and we play an hour set, and the audience is usually right there with us, and if they hear something they like, they let us know. We try to encourage that call and response, not only between the musicians, but from the audience and the musicians. And that's so much a part of the music that a lot of the young players don't hear. A lot of the jazz that you hear today, ever since it started being in the college concerts halls and stuff like that, was people sitting in an audience quiet and applauding at the end of the tune. And that's kind of weird for some of us who grew up in those late night sessions and the jam session sort of thing, where you're in a crowded bar and you get people all around you telling jokes and stuff like that, and you play something that moves the crowd and they just swell and move with you, And if you lose them, they're polite. They say, yeah. You start to get the feel of how you're communicating, and I think that's really important. Are you communicating with the audience and the other musicians? And the audience can let you know that, And so we got that going on pretty quickly, and just it became, something that we always strive for, is to keep that connection between the audience and the musicians.
And you kind of mentioned it, that vibe that's built. Is it the same? Does it change by the artist? Does it every jam session is it the same kind of
Right.
vibe? How does it change?
Well, we try to keep the relationship between the audience and the musician and the guest artist and the trio and stuff. We try to keep that about the same. So, but it always blossoms in different ways, depending upon the character of the evening and the music. It can go in different directions. And that's the beauty of the music. You never know exactly what's going to happen. There was one saxophone player who I love dearly, Eric Lawrence from Nyack, New York, who I've worked with quite a bit in the past. We all have. But he came in and he did a beautiful set, a wide variety of things. And then at the very end, he called a Duke Ellington tune, and I think maybe Bob Weiner was sitting in on drums, and it was maybe the last tune of the night or something like that. And we started playing this nice ballad, and it just blossomed into something that we never expected. And the audience was just totally quiet, listening, and when it was over, they just erupted. You know? It's like we all realized that we just transcended something, you know. So you can't plan those things, but each night has its own little thing, and we try to push the players, the guest artists, and the musicians that sit in. We try to push them to go a little bit further than they think they can go. You know, I mean that's kind of the jazz philosophy, the learn on the bandstand philosophy is you try to push each other to go a little bit further, the challenging, you know, the soloing. You take a solo, I'll take a solo, you know, and you feed off of each other's energy and you try to build it up.
So just two more questions. First thing, what would you describe? There's so many different roles that are played on
Roles that are played?
There's trios playing as the guest artists. There's the audience, and then there's also kind of musicians. And I think what I really want to touch on is what makes this workshop different than most other jazz scenes or communities where, you know, if you only had other musicians at a performance on a Tuesday, you know, how would it be different if there was no audience? Or how would jazz workshop be different if you only had an audience and there weren't other musicians listening to you guys play? What do you think that kind of mixture, that community of having other musicians and a mixture of audience who don't play, what does that bring to the Tuesday night jazz workshops?
Well, like I alluded to earlier in my experiences in San Francisco and also in Philadelphia, to me, jazz has a cultural history too. That's really important to remember. It serves a vital purpose in a community of uplifting the spirits of those people who listen to it, not just the musicians. And I think without all of those things, the core of the musicians, the other musicians who come and feed into it, and challenge each other and talk about the music with each other, and the audience who builds up the importance of the moment, of finding that moment. You know, it just makes it more connected to everything that's going on, you know, at the time. And I think that's really important. Jazz started in this culture of a real need for music and originally dance, you know. And then of course this is kind of comes from the African influences of music and dance in the culture, that it's an integral part of everybody dances and plays a little bit, or at least is very active, and it's a very important part of their life. And some people go towards that as a profession and become masters, and other people just stay as listeners or dancers or participants. And you know, even if you're just bobbing your head and listening like this, you're dancing to the music. And the other people over there are responding that way, as if you're responding to a dancer. You're playing to them as well. Yeah. So it's this social and cultural thing that it's not going to happen with just the musicians, you know, or with. I mean, it could happen with just musicians and a core of musicians and no audience. I mean, and an audience. But the nice thing about having it's the workshop idea is where we have the other players come in and add their voices throughout the night and mix it in. That's where the jazz workshop part of it comes in. So you get, you get the core of musicians and the guest artists take on things, and then they get to sit down for a while and listen to all these other people who had just heard them, you know, and they're sort of influenced subtly, they might not even know it, by the guest artist. And then the guest artist comes back and they've got a new energy all of a sudden, and then some of those those people that sat in come and join, or maybe the guest artist will say, I like that trumpet player, or that piano player, I want him, whatever, and they'll come in and play, and then, so all these things happen, and then the audience is aware of all these dynamics going on too. So that's the thing that it's not in a lot of the venues, is that cultural sense and that community sense. We're all in it together.
So I guess the last question would just be, how does the space add to that? Would you talk about the cafe and that?
Yeah.
That was the origin, this tight space where everyone packed into, the wall, which is
Right.
a lot more spread out. It's kind of got like a real jazzy feel to it because of the art and the dark lighting that they have, the drinks. It just looks like what you would expect when you go to a jazz performance. How do you get that space? And when you relate it to the cafe, how does the space play out to the community and the scene that's been created?
Well, one thing about when we started the Green Street Cafe, I knew it was small, and the sound was not that great. We had a funky little piano that was just never really could, handle all the stuff that we put onto it. But the guest artists just loved it. One, the food was really good. The management was wonderful. It was compact. It was artsy. They had all this hand-painted art, painted by a lot of the waitstaff who were artists working, supporting themselves by serving food. So it was a very artistic, right on the street level, looking right out on the street, jam-packed. In the summer it was hot, and sticky, and everywhere more shorts. But so that's how it developed, and that's why we call ourselves a Green Street Trio now. We wanted to keep some kind of a connection because we realized that part of the reason why this succeeded was people were willing to come there and experience this thing. Artists were sitting at the bar drawing while they're listening, and so we haven't quite recreated that yet. That was special. It had a lot of limitations. The room was small, and people were sitting on the stairs, and they couldn't see in the other room, and the waiters were yelling at people to move out of the way, but it didn't stop anybody from coming. They would jam in there, and the sound was really live. We didn't have to amplify it that much. It was so live. So moving to the new space, it's a lot easier for people to sit, and see. And we're working on the sound. I've been working for 5 weeks now to get the sound right. We're still working on it to try to recreate that live feeling in a dead room. It's got carpeting, and it's bigger, so you have to fill up the space more. But we have a nice piano, and the management's great. Not too many artists are sitting at the bar yet because the light's so dim and dry. It's different. It's just different. But most people have come back and stayed with us, and we're adding new folks too. We're getting, different people coming in. Some people from Springfield and Holyoke are coming in. It's only a couple miles closer, but maybe it's easier to get to, or more room. People can sit at a table. Most people can have a table, So it's evolving into something else. Yeah.
So basically, the last.
This is the third last question.
The question is more, do you have anything you want to add? Is there anything you feel that we didn't touch on that you think should be a part of this documentary? You're telling a story about something you're a part of. Is there anything you'd like to add to it?
Well, I'm curious about hearing the voices of the audience and the other musicians that come all the time. I've been wanting to document sort of the feelings of, because I know some people have told me in emails that this is like a religious experience for them, and they have to go as if they're going to church every week. They just become addicted to the community that has developed around this idea. And I know a lot of musicians come too, and I'd be curious, and maybe you're going to pursue that, to document some of how, their perception of this thing. I know for me, it's been great. I get to play weekly now. It's so important for a jazz musician to play. With, you know, they say as a writer, the main thing you got to do is write every day. It doesn't matter if you throw it out, but you've got to write every day. And it's the same thing for a musician. You really got to play every day. And it's not just practicing your horn. It's practicing, you know, it's playing with other people, learning how to say what you have to say while communicating, you know, time and form and structure and energy, and, you know, with other people. And so I get to do that every week now. And we try to keep the level up high enough so that when people come, they know they're going to get, you know, something a little special, so every time we have a new guest artist, the trio becomes a little better, you know, and the people around us become just a little more, not aggressive, but a little more confident, a little more able to stretch out, you know, to try things that they haven't tried before, you know, because we support each other, kind of thing. So I guess that's it.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. I look forward to it. Yeah. Glad it worked out here. Hopefully you got some.